Let me ask you a question. Have you ever left a leadership team meeting thinking, that went really well, everyone agreed, only to discover 2 weeks later that everyone is doing something completely different? If so, your team may not have an execution problem. You may have an alignment problem. And before we go further, I want to clarify something. Alignment does not mean everyone agrees. Alignment means everyone understands where we are going as a team, why it matters, what decisions were made, what role each person will play, what success looks like, and so on. Throughout my career, I've seen highly aligned leadership teams disagree passionately in a meeting, and then they leave completely committed to the decision. And I've seen leadership teams agreeing with everything and still fail to execute. So what's going on? Many leaders look at this situation and immediately will say, yeah, we have a communication problem. Or maybe they will say, we need more clarity. And honestly, there is some truth in both. Communication and clarity matters. I believe these are often symptoms rather than the root cause. Because if you've already communicated the decision 3 times, clarified expectations multiple times, and people are still moving in different directions, we have to ask a different question. What's underneath? What's there? After working with hundreds of leadership teams, 3 things I often see underneath. The first, priorities. Sometimes leaders genuinely leave the meeting committed to the same objective. The problem is that they are being pulled by different priorities. For example, the leadership team agrees that they want to improve customer experience, and this is the top priority for the organization. Everyone will say yes. Then they go back to their departments. Operations will be focusing on efficiency, finance on cost reduction, sales will be focusing on revenue targets, HR may be focusing on staffing challenges. They are all working so hard, no doubt. They are all doing good work. But the system is signaling different priorities, and people naturally will pay attention to what they are measured for, rewarded for, and that doesn't mean they are resisting. That's a human behavior. So let me tell you a story about a real team I worked with. And we had the challenges that I mentioned about the customer efficiency. So when I mirrored back to them what's happening in the system, they were like, okay, so how can we work differently? And after a deep work, then the CEO said, our priority is customer experience. So the operations came and said, okay, to support that, we will be reducing responses time by 20%. And HR will be training managers on service leadership. IT said, okay, I'll be improving the customer portal. And finance confirmed that they will be prioritizing investments that directly improve the customer journey. Notice what happened. Each leader has different actions, but they are all rowing in the same direction. That's what we call alignment. Alignment doesn't mean HR will become operation or finance will take the role of sales. Alignment means every leader can clearly explain how their function will contribute to the same organizational priority and make decisions that will reinforce this objective than competing with it. They will be resetting the priority of their department in the organization. Now, after priorities comes the number 2, the power. And this is something I often see is a lack of clarity around decision making. Who actually owns the decision? Who will contribute with the input? Who has the final say? You know, I once worked with a leadership team that described themselves as slow decision makers. When we looked more closely, we discovered the problem wasn't their ability to make decisions. The problem was that nobody was completely clear about who had the authority to make these decisions. So conversations kept coming back to the table. The same topics were discussed over and over. So people were waiting for someone to take the final decision, and as results, projects were stalled. Not because people lacked capability, because decision rights lacked clarity. So checking who has the last word and ask for it. So the third point is politics. And before anyone gets uncomfortable with that word, every team has politics. Yep. I'm not talking about manipulation. I'm talking about the unspoken dynamics. The things people know but they don't say. Let me give you a simple example. The CEO will ask for input and everyone is invited to share. However, everyone in the room knows which answer will resonate for the CEO. Or maybe someone has a challenge and decide not to raise the hand because they don't want to create tension. So people will be nodding, accepting, and moving forward. Agreement appears to exist, but commitment was never really built. Now that you have this information, and when you have everyone nodding or agreeing without any challenges, check if this agreement is living on the surface or if there is a deeper conversation that should take place to get the buy-in and the alignment. So don't be satisfied by only that, because this is where we may feel that we need more meetings, we need more communication, more updates, more reporting. All that sometimes helps, but for a while. And eventually, the same issues will show up again, because the real challenge was never the meeting itself. The real challenge was something deeper in the system that was influencing how people interpreted the decision, how they create priorities in their work, and made choices once they left the room. So how can you discover whether this is happening in your own team? I'll give you one simple exercise. At the end of your next leadership team meeting, ask each person these two questions. What decision did we make today? And what will you do differently because of that decision? Then listen, not to judge, not to correct, simply to understand. The answer should not be similar to the decision or kind of. It should be the same. Because if everyone describes a different decision or different actions, you've just uncovered valuable information. You found the gap between agreement and alignment. And once you can see the gap, you can start addressing what's creating that gap. In future videos, I'll be sharing some of the hidden dynamics I frequently see with leadership teams and how they quietly impact decision-making, accountability, trust, and sometimes execution. So if this is resonating, I will be inviting you to take my Leadership Alignment Scorecard. It's an assessment, and it's a short one. It will help you to get a personalized read on where the system may be creating friction, where your team may be misaligned, and where you can focus your attention first. You will find the link in the description below. And I will be really happy to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and remember, agreement happens in the meeting. However, alignment will show up after the meeting. And we'll see you in my next video.